All right, I think I'm going to get started. I'll leave the door open so if other folks want to join us, it's not a huge distraction, aside from, the multitude of distractions that exist in this kind of a space as is. I see something shiny as it is and my head turns. So this is quite the experience, I must say. So thanks for joining me. I'm happy to have all of you here today. I'm going to start off by telling you this is going to be way different than any session you've experienced at a tech conference before. I like when I sign up for these things because what people don't realize is I'm the dark side of technology and don't know that they actually want me here. Because I'm going to talk about the stuff that we don't talk about when we talk about technology in our schools, and that's the negative implications for student mental wellness as we continue to push technology and screen time for our students. So I'm Christine Ravesi-Weinstein. I want to kind of draw your attention to the bottom of the screen. I'm going to talk about some hard things, and I have a little bit of a trigger warning there. When I present, I like to start things off a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is I could sit up here and I could tell you all of my professional accolades and everything that I've accomplished. I will tell you that I'm currently an assistant principal at Sharon Public Schools. But other than that, you assume that I've accomplished something if I'm standing up here in front of you, right? Like they didn't just pull me off the street and like, hey, we got a time slot we need to fill up. You're dressed nicely, you want to come in and do this? That's not how this works. Now, because I'm going to be talking about hard things, mental health, I always choose to take a major risk when I present, and I'm going to introduce you to Christine, the human being, the person outside of a school, the person outside of the context of the professional work that I do. Because it's important for you, in order to believe what I'm going to tell you, to be able to connect with me as a person. Okay? So, this is clearly me. I am a single mom of 2 beautiful children. That's a huge part of my identity. I am a divorcee. I got divorced 4 years ago, so I'm living a single mom life out there on the dating apps, which, if you've ever lived that life, is about as bad as it gets. Okay, so that's me. I have general anxiety disorder. So you can imagine if you have even a little bit of anxiety or general anxiety disorder, what coming to a thing like this is like. I did a lap and I was like, good Lord, I need to find a safe space. This is a lot, okay? But here I am. I was recently diagnosed with major depressive disorder as well. So previously my diagnosis was like general depression, but my diagnosis changed, which might seem like a tiny thing, but is huge for me in terms of moving forward with my life. I was also diagnosed with PTSD. So, people who are like, oh, I have PTSD, and it's like a joke. Those of us that actually have PTSD, it is an intense experience that impacts us greatly. And I'll talk a little bit about why. I also have a bit of OCD. So when I am coming to a conference and I'm going to present, my anxiety kind of ramps up a little bit. And so my obsessive compulsion things start to have an uptick. So my hands this week, one of the things I do is I pick. My hands this week, I was at lunch and I picked another spot and I'm bleeding. And I'm like, oh, this is real sexy. I'm going to go up to the lunch thing and grab the utensil, right? And there's going to be blood on it. That's me, right? That's me. So that's another thing I struggle with. I also struggle with suicidal ideation, which is a very serious thing. So I have moments where life is great, but I just can't get out of the negative headspace of like, maybe I'd be better off not here. And that's a real thing. And it comes and it goes, okay? I'm going to dive into how I got here because it's important for you to be able to understand the students who are in front of you, okay? And I was one of those students that fell through the cracks because I was highly functional. I hate that phrase, right? She's got anxiety, but she's highly functional. Like, what does that mean? That just means I present myself in a specific way where you might not necessarily look at me and say, that's an anxious kid. So this is me growing up. I think I'm adorable. I love looking at these pictures. I had a Mickey Mouse obsession when I was younger. So I don't know what is up with that outfit that I'm wearing over there, but whatever. And I like to show these pictures because I look like a typical kid, right? You look at these and you're like, okay, what's the big deal? You're a little kid, like we all are, right? It doesn't look like there's anything different going on. But my world, my childhood was very unique. Now, we all have unique experiences, and you always hear like, well, everybody's family's a little fucked up, right? Like we all hear that, and that's true to an extent. But the things that I was dealing with were things that I wasn't allowed to talk about. So this is my mom, obviously, okay? This is me in high school. That's me at 17. I look at that picture and I'm like, who is that, right? Aside from the fact that it doesn't even look like me, I was going through a lot. So this picture I like to share of me and my mom because, again, we look very much like any normal mother and daughter, right? I was very successful in high school. I went to Canton High. So for those of you who are from Massachusetts, you know where Canton is most likely. It's actually just kind of up the road from here. I was 6th in my class, very successful academically. I won the Student Athlete of the Year award my senior year for the Hockomock League. I was a captain of my soccer team. I was the all-time leading freshman scorer at my high school. I was the #1 batter in the Hockomock League my senior year. For those of you who know softball or baseball, I batted .500. That means every 2 times I got up to the plate, I got on base once. Just for some perspective, you make the Hall of Fame if you bat .300. Okay? So I was a very successful athlete. That's how I presented because it was what I could control. Okay? Everything else in my world I had no control over. This is my father. This is one of maybe 3 pictures I have of me and my dad. My dad wasn't around. Okay? Why wasn't he around? There were 2 issues. One, he worked the night shift. So he started work at 4 p.m., he got off at midnight. I went to school, obviously, in the morning. Then with my soccer practices, basketball practice, softball games, I didn't get home until like 5, 6 o'clock, so he was already gone. So seeing my dad from Monday to Friday was like, it just wasn't going to happen. So then what about the weekends? Well, my dad was an addict, but he wasn't addicted to drugs. He wasn't addicted to alcohol. He was addicted to gambling, which is something that nobody talks about. Okay? It is an addiction, but not many people know about it. This isn't like, oh, I'm going to go get some scratch tickets. That's not what it was. Okay? He ran this crazy operation where back when there was no direct deposit, you'd get a physical paycheck, right? He'd get the paycheck every Friday. He'd go to the bank and he'd cash it. And he'd gamble it all away. He'd hustle at pool halls. He'd play Keno. I can't imagine how much Keno you have to play. Like I've played Keno here and there, and it's like I'll do like the $1 bet because I'm so lame and I'm afraid to lose money, right? And so he'd lose all of it. But then he'd have to present my mother with some sort of money because she knew he got paid. So he'd borrow it from a friend. And he'd present what my mom thought was hard-earned money. And it was a gambling debt. And he did this for years and years. He also, ironically, being in a football stadium, he ran a Super Bowl pool. You know the ones where like people buy a square and then they write their name in and then you draw numbers. I'm not exactly sure how, right? And so there are numbers on the grid. And then at the end of each quarter, based on the score and the digit in the last score, wherever the intercept is on the squares, like the person wins a pot of money. My dad ran that. And so he would have this, and this is where the PTSD is, he would have this brown bag in our hall closet where he'd keep the cash. And I can always remember the sound of him opening that door and rifling through the brown bag. It's a sound I'll never forget. And so what he was doing was he had this stash of cash, and he would spend it, he'd gamble it. So then what happened when he had to pay people out on Super Bowl Sunday? He had no money to do it. He spent it. So we'd have to borrow that as well. So this was going on behind our backs. We had no knowledge of it. By the time he had to admit to his debts, at the time, I was probably 12 when it came out, so we're talking like 92. He was probably $25,000 to $30,000 in debt at that point. And I remember a big explosion where my mom and dad were yelling at each other, et cetera, and it came out at that point. And I remember we almost lost the house. This was very traumatic for me. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? So I had no relationship with him, and there's this tension going on. And I was a really angry kid. I was angry. I was so isolated. I was afraid. My OCD was kicking in. And when I say this part of my story, I'm not making an excuse, but it's the reality. My mom was angry. She was an angry, angry woman. And to some degree, I understand that, right? That the man she married was running this operation and risking the life she had created. I have 3 siblings. He wasn't around to help her out, and she was left by herself. But, not making excuses for her, she was abusive. That's where she took her frustration and her anger out. Now, my older siblings kind of got out before this all happened, right? I was 12, my oldest sibling was about 20. So the anger was directed at me. So my mom started out as emotionally abusive, and then it became physically. She would buy toys. Do you guys remember it's like paddle ball? What is the point of this? Like, it's like a wooden paddle with a ball attached to it, and you like it's exciting for about 2 minutes. I don't even know. So she would buy that and then use it against us, take the elastic ball off of it, and she'd hit us with it, me specifically. And it got to a point where when I was acting out, she would strap me to the bed in my bedroom. My arms out, my legs out, she'd strap me down and I'd just be screaming and crying and not knowing when she'd let me out. Sometimes she'd put me in there and it was light out, and I would be released and it was dark. No concept of time. How long was I in there? And what I can remember is her voice billowing down the hall saying, if you just stop crying, I'll let you out. But I couldn't understand that concept, right? So now I'm a mom and I have a 7-year-old daughter. And I'll sometimes get mad at her, as all parents do. And I'll be like, Rory, why did you do that? And then she starts crying, right? And now I'm agitated because it's like, just stop crying. Rory, stop crying. You know what she says to me? Mommy, I can't without a huggy. And it breaks my heart because I stop and I go up to her, I give her a hug, and she stops crying. And what I've realized in my adult life was that's all I needed. When my mom was like, if you just stop crying, I'll let you out. What I couldn't communicate was, Mom, I'll stop crying. I just need a huggy. But I didn't get that. So this is going on in my world. Has anyone ever read the book, If You Tell? It's a harrowing story of an abusive mother and how it impacts her children. And in it, it talks about how when you're abused by a parent as a young person, you're stuck. People are like, why don't you say anything? Because if I say something and they take mom away, how am I going to eat? How am I going to get to school? How am I going to get to soccer practice? How am I going to do all these things? And my mom used to tell me, you don't talk about what happens in this house. It's private. And as a young kid, I'm like, okay, I guess you don't I guess you don't talk about family, right? It's private. So I never said anything. And that's how I became so angry and so isolated. But I put on a good face. I ended up going to UMass Amherst. I had a 3.96 GPA. All my fear and isolation, I put it into my studies. I was a phenomenal student. I took 39 college classes. I got A's in 36 of them. I could tell you the class and the professor of the 3 I didn't. It still bugs me to this day, right? Because that's what I could control. I ended up going to Harvard for grad school. Again, you look at these pictures and you're like, no, you seem well adjusted, right? But I wasn't, because once I got out of the house, the first boyfriend I had ended up sexually assaulting me. So now I'm dealing with that on top, right? I leave college. I end up going to Harvard, but I got to move back home to do it. So now I'm back in that environment where I was abused and it was negative and it was terrible. I'm not diagnosed yet. And I start commuting into the city to go to Harvard. So I got to get on the commuter rail, go to South Station, get on the subway, go to Harvard Square. Has anybody done this kind of thing before, right? Isn't this what it looks like when you get off the train? It's a nightmare, okay? So I'm doing this every day, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, like there's too many people. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what's going on. I had my first panic attack on the platform at South Station. I was headed home, and I couldn't get on the goddamn train. I was just stuck. I couldn't get on. I was so afraid about getting on this train that something would happen. And I was pacing back and forth. Oh my God, I can't get on the train. Now the train's going to leave. What do? I got to get home. The conductor kind of like got me out of it. He yelled at me, "Miss, are you getting on this train?" And I'm like, "I don't know." But I got on the train and I called my mom, of all people. Like, "Mom, something's not right. What's wrong with you?" That was how she was all the time. "I don't know, like my stomach's upset, I'm sobbing, I couldn't get on the train. You got to figure this out." So I go to my doctor, explain what's going on. My doctor prescribes Xanax. Xanax, to this day, 20-something years later, is the only thing I have ever done or taken that took away my anxiety. Completely took it away, like euphoric. The first time I took a Xanax, first of all, you don't give someone with anxiety a pill they need to figure out if they've got to take, okay? Because that's another whole battle in my head. Is this anxiety bad enough? Do I take it now? Well, what if I take it and I don't need it? Or maybe I should wait a little longer. Or what if I use all my pills? How am I going to get more, right? First time I took it, I fell asleep on the train, like passed out, fell asleep. To the point where some woman, "Miss, I think this is your stop. I recognize you." I get up, I have no idea where I am. Actually tripped getting off the train while it was still moving, and my shin went forward right into the edge of the train. You know how sometimes you get off and it's like you just step right onto the platform, and sometimes you got to walk down the stairs to get on the platform? It was one of those, and I missed the last step, stepped on the ballast, and my shin went straight in. I nearly broke my leg. But I get in the car and my mom's like, "What took you so long?" I'm like, "Mom, like I might need to see the doctor. Get in the car, I don't want to wait anymore." That's how my mom was. So I started cutting the pills in half, and that would just take the edge off. But I couldn't deal with living at home anymore. And so one night, I went back into the city after school, and I went to the Four Seasons Hotel just across from the Boston Common. And I was with the person I was dating at the time. And I was so nervous to go back in the city, I remember popping a full Xanax. Now remember, last time I did that, I fell asleep. I'm awake. I get to the Four Seasons, I order a martini. I go into the bathroom, I take another Xanax. I was done at that point. That was it. I didn't want to do this anymore. I couldn't deal with going home. So I decided that I was just going to take as many pills and drink as much alcohol as I could, and hopefully I wouldn't wake up. I did, at home that night, in my parents' house, with no idea how I got there. My friends told me that I was passing out, and they just drove me home and did one of these. I don't talk to those people anymore. It was at that point that I knew I needed to do something. I ended up getting my first teaching job. I worked at Attleboro High School. And I was still popping pills. I carried them with me to work every single day. And before my students would come into class, I'd be so anxious that I would take a pill. And I would get through it. But I started to freak out because I was like, my God, like they must know I'm medicated. Or they're going to find out that it's in my bag. Now, it was prescribed, but I could like hear the pills rattling. You know when you got like a pill bottle in your bag, like Advil or Tylenol or whatever, and you can sometimes hear it like rattle? That started to get to me. I was like, I got to get off of these. And I just quit on my own. I told my doctor, I can't do this anymore. So now I'm medicated, but it's very strict. I'm not allowed to take any of those like pills that you decide if you got to take them because you're anxious. I don't do that. I met someone, the ex-husband. We got married, and I had my first kid. And I went through a bout of postpartum depression, undiagnosed for 2 years. It was terrible. It was so bad that it was like, I was in the hospital day after having my son. The nurse walks in and I said, "I'm not okay. I can't stop crying. I'm not well." She looked at me and said, "Oh, all new moms go through that." And so for 2 years in my head, it was all new moms go through that. But the thoughts were intense. I don't want my son. How could I kill him? Maybe I just smother him and I won't have to live this life anymore. I didn't want to do anything. I couldn't focus on TV. I had to go back to work. I hated my job. And that was the breaking point for me. I went back to therapy. I got put on a medication. I ended up deciding that I would take another risk. I had a daughter after that, stayed on my medication, and it was lovely. I enjoyed maternity leave. I didn't want to go back to work. I ended up getting clean, and I started to win awards as a teacher. I won an award back in 2018 for being one of the most influential people in the Southeast under the age of 40. And I was able to get over it. So why do I share this story with you? Why are we here? Why are you in this particular session? We're going to talk about that. Because I by no means, in my adult life as a 43-year-old single mother, have my mental illness under control to the point where I'm like, cured, right? In fact, I'll be so honest with you that in June, I took a leave from work and checked myself into a partial hospitalization because I was not well. So it's a constant battle. And the reason that we're here, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about screen time and technology and how I am tired of having to fight for technology specialists and administrators and instructional coaches to take a step back and be like, wait a minute, what about our students' mental health? Because I'm sitting in your class. And I was fortunate to have no internet when I was growing up. And I'll tell you that the stuff that I have to engage in now as an adult is triggering to me. And I'm an adult who's been through a lot and understands my triggers. And so I'm imploring you to take this into consideration. I'm going to give you some strategies. Don't worry, I don't want you walking out of here without anything. And I'm going to talk about, if you're a district level person, what are some things that you can ask your district to do to help promote wellness? So why are we here? Okay, we're going to play a little guessing game. What is this a picture of? It's a basketball game. Okay, great place to start. What basketball game specifically? Winning shot when, where?
6 or 7
Yes. Did he push off?
I don't know. Probably.
You think so?
Yeah.
I mean, it is Michael Jordan after all, right?
He knows all the calls.
He's the greatest of all time, in my opinion. All right, so it's Michael Jordan. He had some help. What, Scottie Pippen, who was nobody without him? We can debate all day if you want. All right, so that's what this picture is, right? Okay, I'm going to show you another one. What's this? Oh, the anxious girl and the technology stops working. Go figure. All right, what's that a picture of? Yeah, you can't get another prize. Clearly, you and I could have a beer together and talk. Is it what? It's LeBron James. Okay, great. That's a good start. Do you know what particular shot this is? No? Does anyone know what particular shot it is? I'll let you go in a second if we've got to save the room. It is the shot that broke the all-time scoring record in NBA history. So he has now scored more points than any player in the history of the league with that particular shot. Now, what I like about this is they're sort of the exact same shot, right? The angle the photograph is taken. So aside from different time, different player, what's a major difference between this image and that image that you see? What do you see? What's different? You don't have to be a sports person to know this. Cell phones, right? Cell phone. So how many people are on their phone on the left? Not a one, right? How many people are on their phones on the right? Everyone but one. Everyone but one, right? Who's the one? This guy right here. Now, I don't know his name, but when I saw this picture, I read a lot about it. He's one of the richest people in the world. He's not on his phone. Why not? Why not? Let me ask this question instead. Why are all these people on their phone? To take a picture and put it on social media to say what? I was there. Right? So then why isn't that guy using his phone? Because he's there. Because he's got as much money as he wants. He's going to be there again. He doesn't need to tell people, look what I did on Friday night. Because he can do whatever he's living in the moment, right? He's got an awesome story to tell. I don't know who he's telling it to, right? Because he's rich, he's probably a jerk, but whatever, right? These people probably have an awesome story to tell too, right? That you saw Michael Jordan's game. That's crazy to me. But this is the world we live in. So this is what we're going to do now to see how this translates. We're going to take a deep dive into Christine's social media accounts. You ready? Okay. All right. How many of you seen posts like this? Yeah? I'm marrying my best friend, right? Yeah, in 10 years you'll be divorced. What's your post going to look like? Right? I hate this. In fact, I showed this all the time. I didn't get the person's permission because once you put it on social media, what is it? It's public. So teach your students that. I got a private message from this former student. Way to burn a bridge, Christine. Right? Didn't ask. How dare you share my happy moment? What was the context? So I was like, the context is the status quo. That's the context. Well, you didn't ask my permission. I respect. I'm like, I'm sorry, sweetheart, but once you put it out there, it's public, right? Okay, so single mom, divorced, on dating app crap. I see this, right? You know who I'm dating? This guy. This is my person, okay? This is Yoshi, for those of you who don't know. Okay, this is my stuffy. I cuddle him every night. Why? Because 3 years ago, my kids, now anyone play Mario Kart? Right, you got to pick your character. I'm Yoshi. I don't care who you are, you don't take Yoshi. He's mine, okay? And so when I play with my son, he knows you don't touch Yoshi. So for Mother's Day 3 years ago, he bought me this Yoshi. Well, his dad did, because we're still in that phase, but you get the idea, right? It's the greatest present I've ever gotten, because I can just picture my son walking through the store being like, Daddy, I want to get Mom the Yoshi, right? So I cuddle Yoshi all the time. So if I'm making this post, it's going to look something like that. Like, going for a ride with my best friend, right? So it's not real. Let's take another look. How many of you have seen this? Some of you might be guilty of it, right? You hire someone because you got a lot of money to take professional photos of your kids to show off how perfect they are, right? This is bullshit because that girl can't read. So you're doubling down now, right? So I'm sitting there looking at it like, woe is me, like I got to deal with, I'm marrying my best friend, I'm single, that sucks, my life sucks. Then I see this and I'm like, well, fuck. These are my kids if I post pictures of them, right? Like, but I got to absorb this? Like, seriously, right? This is, but this gets to my head, right? It gets to my head because I'm like, this is the best shots I got this week, and I don't have the money to hire a professional photographer to be like, look at my daughter read her adventure book, right? Like, I don't, so it gets to me. I start to dwell on it. I'm not good enough. I'm not at the same place everybody else is. I actually have to start forcing myself to remember it's a snapshot in time. That, can you imagine what it took to get to the moment where they could take that picture? I want to see those pictures, right? I have to remind myself of that. All right, so let's talk about how this translates into schools. Hold on, I think it skipped a slide. Bear with me. No, it didn't. All right, so we're going to talk about the anxiety increase in schools. Now, I'm a school administrator, right? So I see this when it comes to like student attendance and school avoidance. So there's an increase in school avoidance. I'm sure if you work at the building level, or even if you work at the district and you got to report out to the state, you've probably seen that there's a lot more absenteeism, right? School avoidance. Part of that is the impact of COVID, because what we're seeing is COVID happens, we're all at home, right? So there are some kids that did terrible with that. The whole like learning loss thing, whatever, that's a different session, right? But some kids got comfortable. I could have imagined that if I went through COVID as a student, I would never want to go back to school because I'd have figured out how to play the game at home. Why do I got to go back? Just give it to me, I'll do it at home. All that asynchronous stuff, if I could succeed like that, why do I got to be in the building? So that the whole school avoidance thing was increased by COVID. We already had kids struggling to go to school. Then they're doing great at home. It's like, well, screw it. I don't want to go back in, right? The pressures of social media is increasing anxiety. I just admitted to the pressures I feel, right? Kids probably feel a little bit differently. A new outfit that someone's wearing, a vacation they took, right? How many teachers go back after vacation like, what'd you do this vacation? I remember this experience. Kids go to Disney World in the summer, they go to Europe, right? What did I do? Nothing. A whole lot of nothing. And I didn't have to see it though. And our reliance on technology, because when we ask kids to use these newfangled apps and programs, they're not on them consistently. They're flipping to Snapchat, they're flipping to this. They've got their screen in front of them. One of the best things I ever did for my self-care, I turn off my notifications on social media. Turn it off. I don't see those little red bubbles. So I don't open it. And then a whole day will go by and I'll be like, oh my God, I never looked at Twitter today. Do you know how good that is for my emotional health? All right, so all those things, what does it look like in our schools? What are we seeing? Change in mood. Kids are more irritable. You ever try to take a kid's phone away? Yeah, that's like the reincarnation of Beelzebub in its truest form, right? Right? They can't deal with it. They're addicted to it. They get moody, they get irritable. They isolate themselves. How many times do you hear parents talk about how their kid just goes up to their room after school, hangs out in their room, plays video games, gets on social media? They're isolating themselves, not turning work in on time. I deal with kids where I'm like, well, where's that assignment? The English teacher says, you didn't do it. I did it, I just never turned it in. Well, why? Because it either got lost in the bag, or they got distracted and did something else, or it wasn't perfect enough and they were afraid to turn it in, right? That was me. I spent the whole night before the first day of my senior year rewriting my English summer reading logs because they weren't neat enough. That's crazy. I stayed up all night doing it. Kids nowadays will tap out. Forget it. I'm just not going to pass it in. It's only summer reading. Feeling inadequate. I just admitted to that. Me and Yoshi, we got a good relationship, but I don't feel like it's adequate enough. I'm not taking him out to dinner. He does fly when I go travel and speak, though. I got one person once say they thought it was a baby. I'm like, I don't know what planet you're on, but I'm doing way better. Then competition, they feel like they're a failure. Increase in peer conflict. I mean, my God, every peer conflict I deal with nowadays originated with some online, some crap. I had a student in my class yesterday, got into a yelling match with a classmate in the hall. You know why? Because someone else posted a picture of her twerking in class, and she made a comment like, ew, warn us next time. And then that girl took offense to it. I mean, I would too. But like, you get it, right? So it started because one girl was like, I'm going to come at you online. And then was mad playing the victim. I'm just venting now. Lack of physical activity. People don't go outside anymore. They're on their phones all the time, right? I drive my kids to work. I pass this one house where the two girls are waiting for the bus every morning, sitting on the porch, heads in their phone. I remember waiting for the bus. We'd be staying at the bus stop, running around, like playing, hitting each other. If it was snowy, we'd be throwing snowballs. Now kids are they don't even move a little bit. Headaches and stomach aches, right? That was my thing when I was in school. My stomach hurt all the time. I was so stressed out all the time. And the increase in absenteeism, which we just talked about. This is how the increase in anxiety looks. For you to be like, no, there's no increase in school, but yet to acknowledge this means that you're lying. Because we see all this. This is what it's from. So let's talk about the impacts of the screen time that we see. All right, so screen time should be treated like fire. It's a really good thing, right? Keeps us warm, we can cook, but it can also kill you. And that's what you need to remind yourself of when you come to these tech conferences. This is awesome. It's an amazing tool. It can help. But if I'm not careful, I'm going to start killing our young kids. I mean that literally, okay? Teens who stay up late texting are getting less overall sleep and fewer REM cycles. How many of you have experienced this? You wake up in the middle of the night to pee. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, right? You get back into bed and you're like, shit, I'm awake. All right, you start doing math in your head, right? Okay, well, the alarm goes off at 5:15, so it's like 2 hours and 15 more minutes of sleep. All right, well, I can't fall back to sleep, but if I fell back to sleep by 3:30, I think another hour and 4. You've had this conversation with yourself, right? Right? Okay, so how many of you are begging to fall back to sleep? You do. The alarm goes off at 5:15, you feel shittier than you did at 3 o'clock. You're like, damn, I got extra sleep and I feel worse. Why? Why do you feel worse? Scientifically, why do you feel worse? Because you woke up in the middle of a REM cycle. You should have just got up at 3. Because your body woke up naturally. You woke up after a REM cycle, you feel refreshed. You fall back to sleep, you wake up in the middle of the REM cycle, you're screwed. That's happening to our kids. You know the whole no blue light an hour before bed thing? How many of you actually do that? I need to know what your secret is. That's pretty...
I leave the phone downstairs.
That is some serious, serious ability to control yourself. That's one of the first things I'll do if I can't fall asleep when I wake up in the middle of the night is I'll grab the phone. And then I'm like, I just screwed myself. I can't do that, right? This is what's happening to kids. The posture. So I had to go to the chiropractor because my neck was killing me. What I realized it was is I was playing too much Royal Match. Y'all know what that game is? You know what that game is, right? Goddamn, couldn't beat the level. You get to the place where you're like, I don't know, this might be worth $2.99. I got to beat this level, right? And I realized it was because I'm on the couch like this. I had to go see a chiropractor to fix my neck. It's a real thing. 2+ hours of screen time a day is showing kids performing lower on standardized tests. Increase in obesity, not moving, right? Gaining weight. That's what's happening to our young people. Increasing their depression. In this one, how many of you have ever been to a casino? Okay, or maybe you don't have to admit that, right? What happens when you sit at a slot machine? You're starting to lose money, you keep pulling the thing, right? You're not winning. Why can't you walk away? Because you want the money back, and what is your mind telling you? At some point I'm going to win. Or it's that point, like it happens like when you're waiting for a table at a restaurant, right? And it's been like 25 minutes and you're like, fuck, they're never going to call me. I'm just going to leave. But you tell yourself, the second I walk away, what's going to happen? They're going to call my name. It's the same thing in a slot machine, right? You're like, I don't want to play this anymore, but I know the second I walk away, that idiot's going to come over, pull the handle and win. It's like the pickle jar, right? I can't open this. I can't open this. Person over. I helped you. I helped you. I started, right? That is the exact same neurological pathway that the slot machine works on is what your cell phone works on, right? You pick it up. I don't have any messages. You put it down. I pick it up again. I still don't have any. Why do I keep picking it up? Because eventually there will be a message, and that message validates me. It makes me feel good about myself, so I continuously pick it up. It's that intermittent reward pathway, which is the most addictive pathway that exists. It's the slot machine pathway. Okay, so we've talked about all the dirty stuff. What are some strategies? The first 3 strategies are all basic well-being things. Taking care of kids and understanding anxiety. The last 3 are more specific things that you can do. I know avoiding the salad dressing dilemma is weird, but we'll get to it, I promise. So, reach out to your kids. You know that they're already on the screens. So, they act like they want to be left alone, but if any of you are parents in here, what do you know? That's not actually true, right? They want structure. They want routine. They're better when you create expectations for them. When you just let them go, I get it. I'm guilty of it too, right? I want to go work out. I throw a screen in front of my kids so that they'll be entertained for an hour, right? But what inevitably happens? I'm downstairs lifting weights, and what happens? Mommy! Rory told me to shut up! Fuck, I'm in the middle of a set, right? But that's what happens because it's unstructured. They get themselves in trouble. Or I go upstairs and I'm like, what are you watching? Turn the video, right? You got to check in with kids because you care about them, not just because they missed an assignment. I hate that. I got into an argument with the teacher yesterday because he didn't think it was his responsibility to take the initiative on disciplining a kid who cut their class. That's administration's job. Well, what I'm asking you to do is to ask the kid if he's all right. Why did you miss my class? Check in, not because he missed the assignment, but because you care that he's all right. And then being available beyond class time, right? This is a hard one. I'm not contractually expected to do work after 3 o'clock, right? If you care about your kids, you'll check in with them. I don't really need to say much more than that. And don't make assumptions with kids. Ask questions. Like the teacher yesterday was making an assumption. He did it to hurt me. No kid wakes up in the morning and is like, I'm going to be an asshole today. Just doesn't happen as much as we think they do. We've all had that kid where we're like, I know he's out to get me. They don't. You got to validate kids where they are. So when a kid, first you got to build positive relationships with them. We all know that. We hear that all the time. How do you do that? You want to share your own struggles, right? So I built rapport with you as an audience by admitting that I struggle. Now that doesn't mean you walk in the morning and you're like, today's lesson, Miss Weinstein's mental illness. That's not how it works, right? But if the opportunity presents itself, don't make yourself out to be a superhero. The best lesson I ever taught to this day was when I was teaching AP Bio and we were going over neural pathways in the brain. It was standard curriculum. And in the middle of it, the kid that I thought hated me because she never spoke, raised her hand and said, is this the pathway that SSRI drugs work on? Well, I'll be damned. You want to talk about relevance? So I had a choice. Say yes and move on, or take a risk. I said, yeah, you know what? That's the same pathway my drugs work on. Kids were like, wait, what? And so we started talking all about wellness and what we struggle with, right? And I ended up forming a nonprofit organization with the kid who asked the question after she graduated, right? Because I validated what she was asking and I shared my own struggle. And don't say to kids it's going to be okay. That's the worst thing you can say. Don't say that to someone who's struggling. Say, like, I understand why you feel that way. My son has anxiety when I'm like, Nathan, it's going to be okay. He just keeps crying. But when I'm like, Nathan, I get it. I wouldn't want to get wet in gym class either. He's like, oh, okay, mom gets it. You got to focus on the well-being over the curriculum. You got to make learning relevant. You got to be flexible. Teachers who aren't flexible are the most challenging adults to work with. And a good friend of mine, Basil Marin, who I've done some presentations with, he always tells people we have to have compassion over compliance, right? Okay, so the kid didn't turn it in on the day you wanted it, even though you're not going to look at it for a week. So why are you going to dock in points? Why don't you be a little bit compassionate? Maybe something else was going on in that student's life. And advocate for creating boundaries. So kids need to know when they can't do something anymore. This is too much for me. Advocate for that. They need boundaries, okay? You've got to help them advocate for that. You've got to have them be able to be advocates for themselves. Okay, the salad dressing dilemma. I hate food shopping. I hate it. I hate it. I'll do 25 loads of laundry before I want to go to stupid supermarket and food shop. Why? Because there's too many options, right? Like I literally am that person and get stymied in the middle of the salad dressing aisle. I'm like, I thought there was like French, Italian, and Thousand Island, and now there's like organic ranch and ranch that's reduced sugar but extra fat. It's too many goddamn options. I don't know what I'm looking at. I can't pick. And that's what happens after tech conferences. Teachers come in, they're like, I learned about this, and this, and this, and it's amazing, and I'm going to present it all to my kids. And then the anxious kids are like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. We went over this, and then we went over that, and I don't know which one to pick for the project. Because then teachers are like, I shared all these resources, and then I was like, you choose. I gave them student choice. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? Not for the anxious kids. You just screwed them over big time. They're never even going to start. Then what's going to happen is they're not going to pass it in on time, and you're going to take off points, all because you presented them with too many salad dressings. So instead of that, you got to curb your technology excitement. I know you guys come here and it's like, wow, right? Like I walked through, I didn't even know that many vendors existed. And now they're all in one place, my God. It's like, you want to talk about overstimulation. It's like, here, have a duck. Need a highlighter? Want a magazine? Here's a mirror. What is going on? You go home with all these tchotchkes and you're like, I don't even remember where I got them. But you're so psyched to share all this technology. You got to curve that. Because you bring it into the classroom and kids are like, what is my teacher on? Master a few new ones every year. Few. Like 1 to 3. I even think 3 is too many. But over the course of a year, master 1 to 3, present them to your kids so you have like 1 to 3 new things that they feel good about using. So that then when you give them choice, they know that they've got a couple to choose from. I just went way too far back, right? So they're picking from 1 to 3. I can do that. I know if I just want balsamic vinaigrette or I want French. I can't figure it out otherwise because I'm like, oh, that could be good, or I could put that in it, or I could add that. And I just never, I just go to the next aisle. That's what I do, okay? All right. Last, well, 2 more left. Reliable sources, right? There's so much out there. There's so much that, like, even as an adult, I read stuff and I'm like, I don't know, is this true? I have no idea if it's true. So you know what I do? Like, I'll be on Twitter and there'll be like some news out, like report something, and I'm like, is that true? I have no idea. So I click on the comments, like that's going to validate it, right? And I'm like, well, we'll see how people feel. Like then that'll tell me if it's real or not. Because, you know, if John Smith 18975 says it's true, it must be, right? That's how kids are functioning. They'll come in and they'll be like, I saw this, or you can do this, right? It's like why TikTok challenges go bad. Because one person successfully did it against all odds, and so kids are like, I'm going to give it a whirl. And it doesn't go well. So we need to know that the kids are going to be curious. Whatever you present them with, they're going to want to take it to the next level. You got to be prepared for that. You've got to be a real master at those 1 to 3, and or you got to be willing to push kids when they want to find their own answers. You don't tell them what the answer is, but you got to get them talking about why do they think that's the right answer. Because the more false information they have, the more fear they're going to have, which is going to increase their anxiety when they start to see stuff. And then tell them why false information is false, right? So I had students in my class that I would ask for a bibliography. And you know what they'd pass in? There'd be one source, google.com. I'm like, sweetheart, that's like writing the library. What do you mean? I didn't use the library, I used Google. Yeah. But then it spits out all these sites, right? And then you clicked on one, right? Well, yeah, that's what Google does. Yeah, what was that site? Not Google. They have no idea how to do research. This whole, like, kids are smarter than us when it comes to technology because they're on it all the time. There couldn't be more of a false statement ever, right? They have no idea what they're doing. You're smarter than them. Tell them why information can't be trusted. They don't know that. They think everything. And then model it, right? Like when you're doing research for kids, model how you know these things. Or if a kid brings something to you and they're like, hey, I want to use this, dive into it with them, because otherwise they're just lost. And make sure that you're sharing the resources you have with them. That's really important too. And be creative. This one's really straightforward, right? I cannot stand going into a class where they're using this new tech tool and I'm like, so what's the objective? Well, to use the tool. No, I'm pretty sure the Mass State standards don't say to be able to use Padlet. That is not a standard. Why? What is the objective? What do you want them to learn? Then you pick the tool that's going to help them get there. We're doing it in reverse. It's like, look at this new thing, look at this new thing, look at this new thing. You got to help teachers figure out how to use that new thing to accomplish what they need to with the curriculum. Digital worksheets are still just worksheets. I hate that. When I'm like, you gotta use more technology. Well, I did. They did the worksheet on Google Sheets, or whatever, Google Docs. I'm like, just give it to them in pen and paper then. It's the same thing. It's not creative. They're not doing anything on their own. I had a teacher who I observed the other day who gave an honors chemistry class a project. You're going to look up this element, and then you are going to create a poster, and it's going to look exactly like this. This is a 10-second Google search, because the information he wanted was, what's the name, what's the symbol, what's the melting point, what's the atomic mass, I'm like, periodic table. That's the research. Like, what are we doing? Well, they're doing research. It's not research, right? They're just spitting out information. And mix in work that gets them off the computer. Please, please, please. You have to do that. And give them choice once you master those few things. Because they're going to be more comfortable with some things than you are. So, last few things. I know I'm going to be over time. The next group is coming in. The district supports. Here are some. They're probably somewhere out there, okay, that we have used. Gaggle, Lightspeed Systems is good, Go Guardian. Other things districts can do, get an SEL director. Districts haven't figured out how to use that person yet, but at least it's moving in the right direction, right? It needs to be more programming for adults so that they know how to support students, as opposed to just like, we're going to do the Sandy Hook Promise Week, which is great, but it's easily forgotten. We need to do stuff like this for our staff. These are resources that you can use. Here are some resources for me. If you go to my website, there's other things that you can look at, articles that I've written that will help kids specifically that you might want to share with your schools, and a book that I wrote that you can also make use of. Does anyone have any questions before I wrap up so the next presenter can get set up? No questions? About anything? Going once? All right, that's my presentation. Thank you for showing up. I hope you take something away from it. If you've got any questions, this is how you can reach me, through social media, ironically, and my website, Ravesi-Weinstein.com. If you have any questions, you can ask. Thank you for coming. You're welcome.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you as well.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Hey. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sweating. I know, but you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Have you heard of anything? Have you heard about this TED Talk?
No. Hunting.
So what this, do you know what a whale is when I'm talking about app development?
No. Because see, I'm not a tech person. Like, I don't know.
So it's actually slightly worse than what you were saying, because a whale is a person who has a lot of money and doesn't know how to spend it.
Ah.
So in app development, hunting whales refers to finding somebody that has hundreds of dollars that they can pour into something like a game. So that entire TED Talk, which you should look up, is about how to find your mark and then suck them for everything they're worth.
Okay.
So it's slightly worse because social media, games, all that, it's actually predatory. They're hunting for people. They're not just like putting stuff out there that will work into our endorphins.
Take one, or are they for
You can take one. It's totally, yes.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
It's not about just finding the endorphin high. It's about literally taking advantage of people.
Correct.
It's hunting them down.
That's
finding
crazy.
their vulnerabilities.
It's crazy, right?
So we have to be on our guard.
Yeah.
constantly.
Yes.
And,
We don't talk about these things, though. It's
no,
just
this
like,
is fantastic. It was really, really nice to hear
Thank you.
a lot of things that I've said to staff that I work with come out of your mouth.
yeah.
Do you do PD sessions?
I do,
You
yeah.
come out? Can I
Yeah.
give a
Yeah, I
card or
have a
something?
card. Did you grab a book? I'm just going to give you it. So my card and everything is in here. So you get the book and all the stuff is
No, I
inside.
think we're on the cusp of building a new building with new tech.
Perfect. What district?
Somerset.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's too far for you, but
No.
But
Isn't it Somerset Berkeley? Isn't it one
yes.
district?
So Somerset Berkeley High School.
Okay,
is
but then
separate
it's
district with
Somerset.
Somerset, yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
King Philip's, because I live in Plainville.
Oh,
so it's
okay.
Plainville,
Yeah.
Rentham, and Norfolk, and they
Yeah.
all have their own elementary, middle
Because the high
schools,
school,
but then they all come together.
Somerset Berkeley is one school district
Okay.
for the high school, and then the elementary schools and middle school where I work is
Okay.
the other.
Somerset, got you.
Right.
Okay.
But we're building a brand new middle school. We have a lot of new tech coming in, and we have a lot of old timers that are going out. So I'm trying, as a tech integration specialist, I'm trying to be very, very thoughtful about what direction we take. That
Yes,
tech.
yes.
Because I've always been very conservative with the tools, be very thoughtful with the integration. But now, with the money flowing, and
Yes.
we're getting this screen and that
It's-
screen,
yes.
and we're one-to-one with computers.
Yep.
It's very, well,
It's
I don't
tricky.
want to take all your time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, reach
But,
out and we
I
can
will.
chat more.
Thank you
All
very,
right.
very
Yep,
much.
you're welcome.